Finding a compatible bone marrow or cord blood donor can be difficult and terrifying when you or someone you love faces a life-threatening blood disease. Adding any level of complexity to that search can turn a long shot into a small miracle. Unfortunately, that's just what's happening for a growing number of people with mixed ethnicity as they try to find donors with similar backgrounds. Joining us now to explain in Las Vegas, Nevada via Skype, Rainer Spencer, Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Professor of Afro-American Studies at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. In Burnaby, BC, via Skype, Jeff Chiba Stearns, Director and Executive Producer of the documentary Mixed Match, which examines the issue of multi-ethnic donors. And here in our studio, Dr. Heidi Elamaazin, Director of Canadian Blood Services Cord Blood Bank, and Jenny Din, parent of a child in need of a stem cell transplant. Welcome to you in the studio and welcome to you online on Skype. Thank you all for being here. I come from a multi-ethnic background. My children are multi-ethnic, but I've never heard of this issue. Jeff, how did this issue of multiracial patients with blood diseases come under your radar?
A few years ago, I was contacted by Athena Asclepiadis, who runs a group called Mixed Marrow down in the US. And she actively goes out and tries to recruit people who identify as being multi-ethnic or multiracial to the National Bone Marrow Registry, because there is a huge underrepresentation of people who are multi-ethnic or identify as multi-ethnic on the national registries in both Canada and the US and around the world. As well, kind of even before that, somebody asked me to join the registry here in Vancouver. There was a young gentleman up at SFU who was part Chinese, part Caucasian. And he had leukemia, and they were looking for a match for him. And a friend of mine who was a cancer survivor said, "Hey, Jeff, you might be a match for this guy. You should go, join the registry." And at the time, I was pretty busy. I didn't really know what that meant. Why did it matter that I was part Asian? Why did that, sort of factor into being a match for him? So I actually it was 2007. I never actually ended up joining the registry, unfortunately. So it wasn't until 2010 when Athena contacted me that I sort of revisited that topic again and realized it was actually a really important issue that we should explore in a documentary.
So it took you 3 years to join the registry, or you didn't? Why was that?
Well, I didn't know how. Okay. In 2007, maybe it wasn't as readily available. Usually, sometimes they were bone marrow drives at college campuses or churches or public events. Not something I really knew much about. And luckily, in my life, I haven't, had anyone close to me have a blood disease or be experiencing sort of dealing with blood cancers. So, yeah, I didn't sign up until 2011 when we filmed for the documentary A Bone Marrow Drive. And that was the first time I had actually signed up.
So, Rainer, you study race. How hotly debated is this issue among scholars who study race?
Well, I mean, when you talk about race, mixed race, the basic division is those who think that race is a real biological reality, and those who would say that multiracial identity is a real thing, or multiracial existence is a real thing, and those who say that it isn't. So it's one of a number of topics that's debated. But in my time looking at it, the issue of bone marrow hasn't really been a central topic. I think because the field is still relatively new, folks are still trying to develop their positions in general, and so this topic, unfortunately, has not, in my view, been a central topic.
And Heidi, why would someone need a bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant in the first place?
Yeah, most of the time when somebody needs a stem cell transplant, it's because they usually have a blood disorder, a blood cancer. So usually we can treat a stem cell transplant for about 80 diseases and disorders, but the most common things would be things like leukemia, lymphoma, aplastic anemia, sickle cell disease. So it's usually problems with your bone marrow.
And we were just talking about race. So I guess the question that I want to follow up with, are people of mixed race more prone to getting these diseases, or?
No, I wouldn't say it's that they're more prone to getting the disease, but they do have a harder time finding a match if they do need a stem cell transplant.
And Jenny, tell us about your son, Aryan.
Aryan was diagnosed with aplastic anemia, which is basically a bone marrow failure disease, back in November 2015. And
there's a picture of him.
It was life-changing for us. We didn't know, what it was, and the doctors kind of said, best chance of a cure for him is through a stem cell transplant. because he's an only child, it's a 25% chance that a sibling would match you. He had 0 within the family. We had to reach out to the registry through One Match, and to date, he has no match on the registry.
So what would happen if he was to find a match?
Then we would go forward with a transplant.
Would that mean that he's cured, or?
I mean, the success rate is not 100%, but it's his best chance of being cured of the illness. He's currently in remission through a drug therapy. It's basically immunosuppressant drugs, chemo, that puts his system into remission. It's not a matter of if he needs one, it's when he'll need one. And, you know, it's hard. It's hard as a mother to...
How did you take the news when you found out that it would be more difficult for him to find a match because he was mixed race?
I think it was very shocking. You know, when we learned about One Match and we learned about if you were of this race, your chances of finding a match on the registry, Caucasian predominantly, you know, it's a 70 to 90% chance that you'll find a match. And because he's mixed, I'm Vietnamese, his father's Afghan, it basically brings that down to a sliver of the pie. And so, you know, we need to do something to open up and make it more readily available for patients.
And just to take a look at how difficult it is for people to find matches, let's take a look at a clip from Mixed Match.
No doubt, my mixed race heritage is the reason why it's so hard to find a match. It's not that, oh, it's just if you're Asian, it's harder to get a match. No, it's just that there are less Asians on the registry. Then you take mixed race people, and there's like no one on the registry. So you go from a pool of 11 million people to try and match essentially your DNA against, and you take that down to maybe, I don't know, 20,000 people. You're essentially trying to find your DNA twin out of 20,000 people. It's impossible.
So after this conversation, we're actually going to see the full documentary Mixed Match on TVO. And those were American figures that we saw. Here's what the picture looks like in Canada. For people listening to our podcast, something to note is the number of non-Caucasian peoples breaks into single-digit categories for every racial group. So the first graph we're looking at is the ethnicity of Canadian patients. And as you can see, 62% of that composition are Caucasian and 38% are non-Caucasian. And the next graph we're taking a look at is the ethnicity of One Match adult registry. Again, 70% of Caucasians overwhelmingly compose the graph there, with 30% being non-Caucasian. So Heidi, when we look at those numbers, why do so few multiracial or non-white donors appear on the registry?
Yeah, I think it's just that we do have to recruit more people of ethnically diverse backgrounds. You know, there's about 1,300 patients at any given time in Canada who are looking for a stem cell transplant. And as Jen mentioned, the first place they'll look is within somebody's own family. So 25% of people will find a match within their own family, but if they don't find a match within their own family, then they're reliant on these adult registries. And as you just said, the registry is primarily Caucasian, and so it's really important to build a registry or a cord blood bank that's reflective of the unique diversity that we see here in Canada. About half of our Canadian patients can't find matches, and this number is always staggering to me considering we have access to over 35 million donors around the world. So when somebody needs a stem cell transplant in Canada, we're not just looking at our own Canadian registry, but we're also looking at international registries. So even with access to 35 million donors around the world and 750,000 publicly banked cord blood units, we still can't find matches for our patients because donors of those ethnicities don't exist on the registries.
Do you think it's just a matter of education that maybe people don't know that they should donate or they can donate? Absolutely. Or they need to donate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a public awareness piece. You know, to be somebody to be put on the registry, we recruit young, ethnically diverse males primarily between the ages of 17 and 35.
Why that age group?
So you tend to get better transplant outcomes if you happen to use a male donor, and 17 to 35 you get better transplant outcomes because they're younger donors.
So that makes even more selective.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeff, if somebody wanted to make a donation, what would the process be?
Well, essentially, I think online, you can go to Canadian Blood Services or One Match and actually request a kit. Again, Heidi mentioned that you need to be between those ages of 17 and 35 to join. And I think you're kept on the registry till you're 55 or 60, depending on what country you're from. In the US, it's different than Canada. And so that's kind of would be the way people could do it remotely. There's a lot of drives at universities because they are trying to recruit a younger demographic as well. So that's also another place that people could sign up. But yeah, generally, if you want to learn more, this is why we made the film, right? To help educate, to help inspire, but also, for people to understand that there is this need. And so, it is tricky. If you do know that you have maybe a more diverse background, it might be more advantageous for you to join, obviously, because we're looking for people who are more diverse. But at the same time, I think it's important that we have just a large pool of people joining the registry. Obviously, there are certain issues that involve how you can join. I think, if you look at the form, it does specify, particularly it's harvesting bone marrow, right? So it's a blood collection essentially, and they are looking at kind of, what qualifies you to be able to join. So I would just read through the information carefully.
And it is in the documentary, you do see a young woman making a donation, and it's like intensive surgery in a way. How did you, like that, especially with that young woman, can you tell us more about her?
Right. So we were very lucky that we found a young woman. Her name was Alexandria Taylor, and she identified as multiracial in the sense that she was African American, Caucasian, and I believe First Nations. And so essentially,
she had
she went through the process. Pardon?
No, I was just saying that she had, I think, 4 different backgrounds, right?
Yeah, she was quite mixed, and so she went through the process of donating. But it's sometimes it's dependent on, for her, she was donating to a young woman who was around 14, I believe. So usually they want to do what they would do. They would, I guess, do the bone marrow through your hip. And that's a bit more of an operation. 80% of the time, though, it's a peripheral blood collection. So it's actually kind of just like giving blood for about 2 hours. And then you take a drug regimen sort of beforehand to bring the stem cells into the bloodstream, and they can harvest those. So most times you're not actually put out. You're actually just sort of sitting in an apheresis machine, and they're just collecting the blood. So that's one misconception that people have, is that they think that they have to have this operation. And like I said, 80% of the time, you usually don't have to have an operation because it's not needed in that case. And I believe in the US and Canada, it's a little different how they choose that. But I believe the percentage is around 20% the actual operation, 80% the actual peripheral the stem cell collection that's done just through an apheresis machine. So quite invasive, essentially. Yeah.
And Reiner, why does it have to be someone of the same race or ethnicity?
Well, see, this is where I like what you folks are doing in Canada, in the sense of you're trying to diversify the pool and trying to get more people into the pool. So I'm a racial skeptic. When you talk about how do you know that someone on that list is this or that or has these mixtures? Because they tell you so. But do they know what mixtures they are? Afro-Americans in the United States are the most genetically diverse folks in the United States, followed by Latinos, Hispanics. So the whole concept of race is problematic in this regard. But I like the fact that what you're talking about is adding more people to the registry and diversifying the registry. That's the most important thing, not asking for people of specific races. In the United States, the issue is a little bit backwards, like it's cart before the horse. Most of the argument, most of the discussion in the United States is around, well, we need to have a multiracial category in the federal census so that we can identify ourselves as mixed race, and therefore we'll be able to find matches. Well, that's ridiculous. It's the science that finds the matches, regardless of what you call yourself. So I would have to say that I support the idea of maximizing the number of donors. I support the idea of diversifying the number of donors. But I think we get into a whole lot of inaccuracy when we start talking about what specific mixtures people are.
So you're saying that race is not a useful tool when it comes to categorizing people, especially for something like this?
No, I mean, I don't think so.
How else could you do it?
Well, I mean, surely we don't identify matches based on what people have marked on their forms. We identify matches, I would think, by finding the HLA counts scientifically. Isn't that right?
Heidi?
Yeah, that's correct. So when somebody needs a stem cell transplant, they match the donor to the recipient, and they match on HLA markers. So these are protein markers found on your cell. And so to the point that was made, I can identify as one race, but my HLA I might self-identify as one race, but my HLA might show to be common of a different race. And
so is this where maybe like a DNA test would be useful in finding out what a person is?
Well, essentially HLA is like, it's like a DNA marker for what your race is. So I think the point is really just to build a registry that's reflective of the population that we do have here in Canada.
But what would happen if a mixed race person received a donor from a monoracial individual?
And they can, if they are matched to their HLA, it's finding the best match for that patient. And your best match might be from somebody who is of Caucasian background or who is of indigenous background. So it really is just based on your HLA markers.
So this is probably going to be beyond your community too, right? Because if people are getting forms and they see their section, and if it's not there, they're not marking it, right? Then they might, like what Reiner was saying, they might not be able to identify that they can donate, right?
I think we don't discriminate who can donate to the registry or to a cord blood bank. We take anybody who wants to join, but to your point, you might self-identify as one race, but your HLA might show that you are of a different background.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your, when you did the campaign for RE, Match for RE, what was the response like, Jenny?
Overwhelming. We formed Match for RE when we were in the hospital, so December 2015. And once we found out that RE didn't have a match on the registry, we said we had to do something. And then we started to learn more that, you know, it's his chances. And so we had to increase it. So family, friends came together, launched Match for RE. Canada-wide, we actually went through into the States as well with Be the Match, with Mixed Marrow, held swab drives. It's about advocating and spreading awareness to let people know, you know, you can save a life by a simple swab. Putting yourself on a registry could mean a lifetime for families like ours. You know, we've registered nearly, I think about 5,000 donors worldwide. We had some registries, swab drives out in Europe and Asia. So, you know, it's just networking and letting everybody know it can happen to anybody, and just like our family. And we got to do something about it now for the future.
How is Ari doing right now?
Ari's doing well. He's in remission. He's, you know, back to being a 12-year-old, but a very self-conscious 12-year-old. You know, he still can't play his baseball or anything hard contact, and you know, it's hard. His system is still compromised, but you know, it's hard. It's hard for a 12-year-old or 10-year-old back then to realize what's going on, but he self-advocates for one match as well, to say, you know what, I need a stem cell match, and let's do something about this. And
what's it like for you knowing that at this point you've done everything you can to help your child?
I feel as if I haven't done everything I can, because he still does not have that match. You know, everybody we meet, new friends we meet, the first thing we say is, are you on the registry? And you know, this is the reason why. You know, our son is in need of one, and you could potentially be a match to somebody. I firmly believe that everybody has that genetic twin out there, and we just need to get them on the registry. Just like Heidi was saying, how I know a stem cell recipient, he's actually of Asian Chinese background, but his donor is actually German. So you know, it's not what you physically look on the outside, it's what's really you're comprised of.
And we've been talking about education and getting people, raising awareness, being a very important component in this. So what is the Canadian Blood Services doing to increase the number of donors on its registry, Heidi?
Yeah, so Canadian Blood Services runs the adult registry in Canada. So we obviously like to try to just encourage people, like I said, between the ages of 17 and 35, especially if you're young, ethnically diverse, we really encourage you to join the registry. But we've also set up a national public cord blood bank in Canada. So cord blood is another form of stem cells. So like Jeff was talking about how you receive stem cells from an adult donor, either through an apheresis machine, which is very much like a blood collection, or through a bone marrow aspiration. But the other way that you can get stem cells is from cord blood.
After babies are born, right?
Yeah, so after a baby's born, we collect the blood in the umbilical cord and the placenta, which usually gets discarded as medical waste. So if a mom is delivering at one of the designated collection hospitals that we've partnered with in Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, or Brampton, another way that people can help is to donate your baby's cord blood, sign up to the registry. And of course, all of these patients who undergo stem cell transplants are always in need of blood products. So we always encourage people to donate blood as well.
How high is the demand?
Like I said, right now we're searching on behalf of 1,300 patients, or over 1,300 patients in Canada right now who are looking for a stem cell transplant.
Well, I want to show you another clip of Mixed Match, the documentary that's airing after our conversation. And this is a clip of Dorothy Roberts, a professor and author on matching donors by race.
I don't see why scientists who are working in this area, just biomedical research in general, can't come up with a better way of identifying people. You know, why rely on classifications that came out of the 18th century? It's the same groupings that are being used today. And I often get this objection, well, we don't have anything better to use.
Jeff, I'll go to you first. Is there a better way to match people other than race?
Well, essentially, you're looking at your ancestry, right? You're trying to find a genetic twin. What you're doing is transplanting an immune system into someone. That's complex stuff. And to do that without rejection is to find someone who is genetically, basically identical to you. So that usually depends on your ancestry. And the way we look at ancestry is obviously how do we use the language of, I guess, race in this context. And a lot of times, you know, you can look at regions, geographical regions, but a lot of times people are like, I don't know if I'm North Asian or East Asian or South Asian, because I know I'm Japanese. My ethnicity, you know, my ancestry comes from Japan. It also comes from parts of Europe. And so knowing that, you know, it helps people identify where to look. And also, if you're someone searching for a match, and I know that someone identically, you know, might be similar to me in their DNA, is part Japanese, part Caucasian, I'm going to try and target that group. Right? So it helps me identify and say, let's get more of that group on because it could help me or someone searching. And so that's sort of, and also when they search, you know, if you are, for myself, part Japanese, they're also going to know that if my ancestry is Japanese, they're going to look at the Japanese registry as well. They did a search for me to be the match, and it turns out I have one potential match that is from Korea. And out of 20 or 30 million people, you know, that's kind of nuts, you know, that I only have one person that could potentially be a match. So really what you're doing is you're trying to find that genetic twin. And however we use the language of race in this context is the easiest way for people to identify. And you're right, not everyone knows what their background is past their great-grandparents and so forth. But I think with these ancestry sort of tests that you're getting, people are finding out. You know, it's like they're realizing, oh, geez, you know, I am a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So they can self-identify a little bit easier. But really, I think it's to keep stats to see how this is reflective of, you know, the Canadian sort of landscape of diversity, but at the same time, also helping them look, you know, if they know that your background is somewhere in the world, what registries they can target to help look if they can't find someone within the Canadian or the U.S. registries.
It really feels like it's like you're looking for a needle in a haystack, right? Reiner, I think we talked a bit about it before, but is there a better way to do this other than race?
Well, I don't think race is a very good way to do it. I mean, I think science, you know, banks and science and computers are the way to do it. To just give an example, right? So let's say I'm mixed race. Or let's say I have two people who are mixed race. But one of these, so let me say also, I come from the Afro-American context. That's why I study. And as I said before, Afro-Americans are the most genetically diverse group of folks in the United States. I mean, the idea that there is something called a black person with a black DNA is insane. So let's say we have two mixed race people, mixed race Afro-Americans, except one of these Afro-Americans has 7 black great-grandparents and 1 white great-grandparent. The other one has 7 white great-grandparents and 1 black great-grandparent. Both of them would be considered black in the United States. Both of them might identify as black. They both might identify as mixed race. But you're talking about such difference between these two people. It kind of, I'm just trying to explain how it is that despite what we see with our eyes, the phenotype. We see nothing about the genotype. And the fact that that your guest said that the match wasn't even what the match that they did find came from Germany as opposed to where they were looking, I mean, shows that it is misguided, I think. So I think the idea is get as many people in as possible, diverse as possible. Look, I can be kind of draconian. I think it ought to be mandatory that people, that put their blood in for this sort of thing. Would never happen anywhere I know, but that's the key. The key is diversity and maximizing the content of your pool.
Heidi, I know you want to get in. What would you like to say?
I think it's important to realize we don't actually match based on ethnicity per se. We match based on HLA matching. Ethnicity helps us.
The forms, though.
Yeah, it helps with recruitment. It helps us to sort of get a sense of, are we putting the right people, broad strokes, on the registry?
But don't you think it's kind of it's limiting or there's a message that's being lost within those two things?
I think, though, our message is we always try to recruit everyone, right?
Okay.
So we are trying to build, like I said, a registry or a cord blood bank that's reflective of the diversity that we see here in Canada. And so we don't limit people from joining, but it helps us broadly know if we need to target certain groups because we need more African American people on a registry, more Black people, more Chinese people. So that just helps us broad strokes. But when you actually match a donor to a recipient, it's all based on scientific HLA matching.
Well, here's national news reporter Dakshana Bhaskaramuthi writing in the Global Mail. Navigating the many complications that come with a mixed identity, which range from political to sociological to health-related, is becoming more common across the country as an increasing swath of residents are reporting multiple ethnicities, according to data from the 2016 census. In the last 20 years in Canada, the multi-ethnic population has grown by almost 4 million people, almost double the overall population growth rate, to make up 41% of the country's total population. Given the population is on the rise, does that make you optimistic that there will be more donors for the registry?
Optimistic, but it could also be challenging because I think it's going to become a little bit harder to find stem cell matches for people unless we build a registry that's reflective of the changing landscape that we see here in Canada. So I think, like I said, that's why it's important that people get out and join the registry, join the cord blood bank to help build that diversity, because I think this will be an ongoing problem. We know that we have problems finding matches for ethnically mixed patients, and so to your point, with this growing, it might become more of a challenge in the future.
And Reiner, what do you think?
Well, in terms of so here's what I would say. Again, always the skeptic. At least we have the same arguments. So yes, getting more people in is the important thing. But we have the same sort of claims made in the United States that the mixed race population is growing. Here's an example. If Afro-Americans are the most genetically diverse people in the United States, and if I'm an Afro-American, and if I have a child with a white person, how is that child any more mixed race than I am if I'm already mixed race? Afro-American people are always already mixed race, so they can't get any more mixed. So I just think the conversation when it talks about racial groups and monorace and mixed race is a confused conversation. I think the simplest thing to do is to simply get as many people as you can into the darn registry.
And Jeff, are you optimistic about the numbers growing, considering that the mixed race population or people with multiple ethnicities are on the rise?
Yeah, I think that's happening. I think the cord blood is also a great step forward because with cord blood, it's a little more forgiving. You don't need to have a perfect match. And actually, they've sort of shown that sort of having a bit of a mismatch is actually better. So you can have someone who, in our film, the longer form of the film, we have a gentleman who identifies as Chinese, but his match is actually someone who has a Latino background. And so he becomes kind of this mix at the end. And so that can happen, of course. Usually if you do hear these instances where someone who is maybe African-American can match a white person, but that might be a 6 out of 8 match, right? That's not a perfect match. And that's sort of what's happening. In our film, we've actually shown that Alexandra Taylor, who did donate, she met her recipient, and her recipient was almost identical, identified. She had a white parent and an African-American parent. And so this happens. And I think to say, we interviewed Dr. Paul Terasaki, who created the HLA typing, tissue typing, and he said, if someone in America who identifies as African American would probably never ever be a match for someone in Africa, because in Africa, there's still this sort of quote unquote purity. And so someone from a particular tribe would find their match within that tribe. Right, coming to America, obviously, there's a lot of admixture, centuries of mixing, as Rainer said, and so that's part of the challenge there too. And I think for African Americans in the U.S., there is a great challenge to find, donors for them on the registry because they are also underrepresented, and they also have very complex genetic typing, right? So I think as we see this rise, maybe of quote unquote, multiracial people. We will, I guess it will present certain challenges, obviously, because, our DNA is getting more complex, right? And so, like I said, I have very rare genetics. I have a daughter who also, now my wife is also part Japanese and Caucasian. Our daughter is now, the same mix as us, essentially. And so, I don't know, could that present more of a challenge because we're getting more and more and more blended? Possibly, but I think the overall consensus is we just need everyone that can join the registry to help increase those odds.
And Jenny, this is something that you live with day to day. We are kind of on the outside looking in. What's it like for you? Are you optimistic that with the increase of the population, people of multiple ethnicities, that you will find a match for your son?
Optimistic, yes, providing everybody gets onto the registry. I think at the end of the day is to get that chart more and more diverse to represent our country. It's bittersweet, I guess, in that sense of the more diverse our future generations become, and if we don't spread the awareness now, what are they going to face? Like Jeff mentioned, his daughter is, a blend of him and his wife, which is, they're blended. So it just gets more diverse, and just hoping to get everybody on the registry to make sure that everybody has that chance.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and our love to your son, Ari.
Thank you.
And Heidi, thank you. Jeff and Rainer, thank you all for being a part of this discussion. I do believe that education is one of the steps to getting people to know about this. Now I know about it, and I'm going to be looking for my kids as well. Stay tuned after the program. We do have the premiere of Mixed Match right here on TVO.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.